There are many obscure and really weird official Mario games out there. Games like Mario's Fundamentals,
Mario, go fish!
Come here, fishy fishy!
Hotel Mario, the Virtual Boy games, or that one time they abused the Mario brand to teach kids typing. So the thing is the following: even though all of those games are really obscure in one way or another, they're all still official Mario games licensed by Nintendo, and thus they're part of Mario's history. All of those games are super weird. Some are actually kind of fun, some are okay, and to be honest, most of them are among the worst games Nintendo ever released. But all of those obscure Mario games also kind of raise a question. Which one of those really bad Mario games is actually the worst one? So I sat down and started to investigate this eternal question. I played dozens of hours of really weird Mario games, taking notes, researching their history and development process, all in the hopes to find out which game featuring Mario is the worst one ever released. And I pretty quickly came to a realization: there is way too much going on in these games to cover all of them in a single video. There are crazy development stories, unimaginable broken ports, missing features, obscure minigames, voice acting that seriously had me double check whether there is something wrong with my audio setup,
Come here, fishy fishy!
and gameplay ideas I wouldn't have thought it possible to build a game around. Those games are truly amazing. So instead of answering the eternal question, which Mario game is the absolute worst one, in a single video, we're going to do this in a small mini-series. We're going to take a closer look at some of Nintendo's weirdest moments, starting today with the fascinating game Mario's Time Machine. So are you ready? Let's do this! Okay, so the first really strange game we're going to take a look at is Mario's Time Machine, originally released on the MS-DOS. So Mario's Time Machine was the long-awaited sequel to the equally obscure game Mario is Missing. Let's read the game's description on the amazing Mario Maker wiki together, shall we? In the year 1993, Bowser uses a time machine traveling backwards to different points in human history and stealing significant artifacts to place in his personal museum inside his castle. With his collection nearly completed, Bowser gloats that not even Mario can stop him now. Mario realizes that history will change forever if he does nothing, so it's up to Mario to use Bowser's own device against him by returning the artifacts to their proper places in time. Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it? The game also starts really promising. The intro music is nothing short of amazing. The pixel art looks really great for a 1993 game. The story is presented in a really cool way. I can't wait to find out what the gameplay is actually like. So let's jump right into it. So we find ourselves in this room. Alright, so what are we supposed to do here? There are no, instructions. So we can't walk to the left. We neither can walk to the right nor through this door. Wait, does the whole game take place in this room? Okay, so we can pick up this sheet of music. Excellent. I wonder what this is useful for. Alright, so then there is this interface. What is this screen for? Why are we playing a surfing minigame right now? I've got so many questions. Why are we surfing here? How did Mario end up in this place? What is the objective of the game? Why did this happen after entering the time traveling interface? Why do the mushrooms disappear at random? And most importantly, how do we leave this game again? So as it turns out, driving into a water stream does the trick. We're back in the castle. So what we just witnessed was one half of the game, the time traveling minigame. And yes, the time traveling minigame is a surfing minigame. I have no idea either. The other half of the game is retrieving, solving and returning the different artifacts Bowser stole. We already picked one of those up, the note sheet. So spoiler warning, as it turns out, the note sheet we picked up in the castle before is no ordinary note sheet. Actually, it's a quite important note sheet. It's Ludwig van Beethoven's 9th Symphony. And the only way to ensure that this wonderful piece of music is not lost for eternity is to return it to its rightful owner, Ludwig van Beethoven. But first, let's solve a fill-in-the-blanks text, shall we? Apparently, the greatest composer who ever lived, Ludwig van Beethoven, spent most of his life in the Austrian musical capital of Vienna? Born in 17 1770? Hooray! Ludwig gave his first... That's a tough one. Gas concert? Oh no, I made the smiley mad. Maybe he gave his first metal concert? Oh my god, that's wrong as well. I could have sworn he gave metal concerts. Now there are two sad smileys. I start to feel the pressure. He gave his first second concert? Oh no, that's been wrong too. I'm so sorry, Beethoven. Luckily, the only penalty for entering something wrong is that the screen closes. I'm not kidding. We even keep the right answers saved for later. That's really nice of you, game. So let me quickly brute force this. So as it turns out, the answer was his first piano concert. Who could have known? Okay, it's probably time to talk about the actual gameplay loop of this wonderful, strange game. So the core idea is the following. Our hero in a jumpsuit first has to pick up one of the artifacts, which grants him access to one of many legendary and different fill-in-the-blank texts, assuming our plumber isn't able to solve them by using logic and luck, which he is, but let's pretend for a second he isn't. He's supposed to enter the corresponding time on top of the fill-in text into the timulator. Once entered successfully, which is easier said than done thanks to the horrific and unbelievably slow interface, we find ourselves, yep, that's right, we find ourselves in the surfing minigame. The goal here is to travel through time. But how does one travel through time? Well, by picking up 10 delicious mushrooms and then committing suicide via a whirlpool. If we enter a whirlpool with less than 10 delicious mushrooms, we're sent back to the single room in the castle. If we enter the wrong time or place previously, we end up in the castle as well. But if we did everything correctly, we successfully surf back in time. Hooray! In this case, we find ourselves in the beautiful Austrian musical capital, Vienna. The year is 1824. There is a lot to discover and to experience in Vienna. We can go for a walk on the streets, we can visit a hotel and talk to the locals, take a peek at a concert room and talk to the locals, or we just talk to other locals. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So the idea here is that Mario has to interrogate all the locals until he gathered enough knowledge about Beethoven and is able to fill in the legendary fill-in-the-blanks text. Once the text is solved, we can hand it to Beethoven himself, summon a creepy gigantic hand and return to the present. That's the game in a nutshell. Rinse and repeat. The next fill-in-the-blanks text might be about Newton or about Cleopatra or Mozart or whatever, but it's the basic game loop. Pick up an artifact, surf with style through time, solve a fill-in-the-blank text, and repeat. Okay, so is this obscure educational gameplay loop any fun? Well, let me be honest here. Sadly no. Actually, the idea is kind of cute. I kind of like the concept of traveling through various time periods, learning about the people there, and then to apply this newly learned knowledge. But sadly, it just doesn't work. First, such a game isn't the perfect fit for a Mario setting. Second, everything is unbelievably boring if it is not just flat out broken. The game lacks any introductions on what to do, and worst of all, everything takes forever. The surf game is slow, entering the text is slow, the timulator is unbearably slow, talking to people is slow, everything is just slow. It's so unbelievably slow that I doubt anyone would ever be silly enough to do a speedrun of this. Yeah, never mind. Anyway, so if the gameplay isn't fun, does the game at least succeed at teaching kids history? Well, that can be debated. So first, the way the game is structured just isn't a good way to teach anyone anything. Like seriously, Mario's Time Machine, if you want to teach kids history, then do it like the Civilization games. But that is actually the smaller problem. The bigger problem is that the game constantly gets history facts wrong. Cleopatra talks about having 3 sons when in fact 1 son is a daughter. The game states that Mozart's wife calls Mozart Wolfi, which never ever happened once. They got this from the movie Amadeus. They state that Mozart became a concert master at the age of 13 when he was actually 17. Mario receives a tea bag in 1455, even though tea bags were not commercially available until the 1920s. The game implies that Benjamin Franklin is responsible for cobblestone roads, which, he's not. The game even gets the date wrong on which America's Declaration of Independence was signed, and that's just a couple of the errors. Here's the full list taken from the amazing Mario Wiki. So, the SNES version of Mario's Time Machine is an educational game about history that fails as a game and, well, in history. Is there anything that saves the game? Well, the pixel art is sometimes really good, especially for a 1993 game, and parts of the soundtrack are really okay. One of the tracks, for example, finally answers an eternal question that I've found myself often wondering about while laying awake in bed late at night. What would a Mario remix of Beethovens Ode to Joy sound like?
Freude schöner Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium, wir betreten freudentrunken himmlische dein Heiligtum.
I always thought that would sound, better? Anyway, so that's the SNES version of the game. The DOS version of the game is very similar to the SNES version. I'd argue the game is slightly better, it features a couple more time periods, and most importantly, the surfing minigame is by far less worse. Also, there is this minigame. That's the Dino Minigame. It happens if we try to travel to a wrong time period. So, I know what at least one of you is currently thinking. A Dino Minigame? How exciting! I wonder how this minigame works. To such a person, I would answer, yeah, I wonder too how this minigame works. Like, I have honestly no idea. I'm not kidding, by the way. When I first got to this minigame, I was stuck here for over 15 minutes. I tried to Google how to leave it again, but apparently no one in the whole internet knows the answer. It's really super weird. There are those blasters at the bottom which don't kill us but fly towards us in endless waves until they randomly stop to spawn after about 10 minutes. And then there's this bird that, drops eggs. To our right is a hole in the ground which we can click, but clicking it does nothing, except for the one time after 15 minutes when clicking it suddenly randomly revealed the Yoshi, which took us back in time. Hooray! If anyone knows how this minigame is supposed to work, please tell me in a comment. I'm honestly super curious. So anyway, other than that, the SNES and the DOS version of the game are very similar. But we aren't done with this obscure little treasure of a game yet, because as it turns out, that's not the final port of Mario's Time Machine. Because as it turns out, there is actually a third port of this game. And this is where stuff gets really obscure. Because as it turns out, Mario's Time Machine got ported to the NES in 1994, almost 4 years after the release of the Super Nintendo, which makes it one of the very last games ever to be released on the NES. Mario's Time Machine got ported onto the original Nintendo Entertainment System only 2 years before the Nintendo 64 got released. So obviously, getting this game somehow onto the NES was really important to someone. But what does the NES port play like? Well, nothing like the other two ports, that's for sure. It's a completely different game. Like, completely different. So check this out. This time, Mario's Time Machine starts by Mario and Yoshi happily riding together towards the museum. But what is this? As soon as they arrive at the museum, a text box informs them that Bowser and his Koopas built the biggest museum in history. But to do so, they have stolen many important items from the past. So this information is obviously not enough to get Mario to act immediately. All it does is slightly confuse him. So the game has to pull another trick to finally get Mario to behave as if he cared. Bowser turns up, does an evil turtle dance and kidnaps Yoshi. Mario obviously likes Yoshi. And as the game tells us, retrieving the stolen artifacts is the only way to rescue Yoshi, for reasons unknown. So retrieving the artifacts it is. But how does one single plumber retrieve those artifacts? Well, definitely not like in the DOS version. So first, we find ourselves in the middle of Bowser's Museum, which is a far more exciting place than in the other versions. If we ignore the lack of color for a moment, we're able to explore this place freely. There are cool statues, several doors we can enter. Even the camera learned how to scroll when getting ported to older hardware. Behind the doors, the artifact retrieval minigame takes place. You see, in the other versions of the game, the artifacts just lay around and can be picked up whenever we want. But not in the NES version, because in the NES version, we first have to play the second worst version of the original Mario Bros. Ever released. So I'm not going to go into detail why this version is so bad, just know that it's impossible to fail the game, the hitboxes are wrong all the time, Mario's jump feels horrible and the only way to lose this game is by exiting it by accident, which happens surprisingly often. Anyway, after defeating 3 Koopas, the last Koopa drops one of the artifacts. Here, Newton's apple, for example. That's the first half of the game, obtaining the lost artifacts by playing something that visually resembles Mario Bros. The second part is it to travel to the correct time period and to return the artifact to the right spot. So here is where the port really becomes different to its predecessors on superior hardware, because there are no legendary fill-in-the-blank texts anymore. Yup, instead the game plays like Super Mario Bros, but with a unique twist. So the different time periods are like Mario Bros stages, but the unique thing about them is that each time period contains cool educational blocks that tell us about the time we're currently in and about the place where the item has to be brought to. So the torch, for example, has to be used at this spot in the ancient Greek timeline. If we use it anywhere else, an evil bird appears and unrightfully steals our stolen artifact. If we use it here, however, then we save the Olympics. Hooray! But learning about the different time periods is quite a dangerous task because of all the evil enemies that spawn in literally endless waves. There are brave Koopas trying to stop us, evil hammer swinging bros trying to hammer us down, and worst of all, those guys. Let's call them walking turnips, which also try to stop us. So that's the core gameplay loop. Play Mario Bros to gain an artifact, travel to time periods where we play Super Mario Bros, while also getting educated about different times in the past until we finally learned where to bring the artifact to, while dodging all the horrific threats along the path. Doesn't sound like a bad game, does it? And to be honest, Mario's Time Machine on the NES is almost an okay game. Almost. There are just 3 things that are really holding it back. 3 things that prevent the game from being an okay experience. Namely, first, we can't fail the game. Remember the awesome enemies from before, the dangerous hammer bros, the creative walking turnips and so on? Well, those are basically decoration. They don't hurt us. We can stand here getting hammered down by this hammer bro for as long as we want to. Nothing is ever going to happen. Defeating the enemies is pointless too, since they respawn immediately. The Mario Bros minigame can't be failed either. The whole game just can't be lost. But that's by far not the biggest problem of the game. The far bigger problem are Mario's horrible, terrible, and beyond awful jumping physics in this game. The basic problem is the following. Mario's jump height is always the maximum jump height. As soon as we press jump, even if it's just a super duper quick mini jump press, Mario does a huge max height jump. Jumping just is a button that always accelerates Mario into the air for the exact same distance. Couple this with the absolute lack of any momentum and really weird in-air controls, and we got ourselves a platforming game where platforming feels awful. But not even this is the biggest problem of the game. The biggest problem is the level design. So calling the level design in the NES port uninspired would be an insult to the word uninspired. All the levels are just built in such an unbelievably random way. There are random enemies somewhere, random blocks somewhere, and the educational blocks are placed at some random spots too. I'm honestly not sure if I ever played a serious Mario Maker stage with a level design that bad. It's like they didn't even put the slightest thought into how to set up the different time periods, and it really shows. Those 3 things really hold the game back and are the main reason why playing it is sadly a rather unpleasant experience, in my opinion. Alright, so those are Mario's Time Machine on the NES and on the Super Nintendo in a nutshell. But before we end this little video, we still have to answer one final question. How horrible are those games in relation to the other really obscure Mario games? Since the NES version is so different from the DOS and the SNES version, we're going to rate it separately. So let's pull out our horrific scale of horrible hammers. Let's rate the SNES and the DOS version first. So Mario's Time Machine on the SNES and DOS scores a total of 4 horrific hammers. The game is really awful. Not only is it filled with historical inaccuracies, broken minigames, unbearably slow interfaces and a lack of instruction, but worst of all, even if all those things would work, the game would still be an uninspired, weird hybrid between a history test and a walking simulator. The whole idea for the game is just broken in the first place. The only thing that prevents the game from getting a full amount of horrible hammers is the fact that the presentation is kind of nice and parts of the soundtrack are really well done, which leads us to the NES version of the game. So dearest NES port, that's 3 hammers for you. Great job. That's 1 awful hammer less than your predecessors on better hardware. The NES port is in a really weird position because behind all the awful level design, the horrible jumping physics and the lack of, challenging gameplay, the game is almost a bit of fun. Like almost. It's really a pity because if the team just tried a bit more, Mario's Time Machine on the NES could have been an okay game. So here we have it, a quick overview over Mario's Time Machine, one of the weirder adventures in our plumber's adventurous career. I hope you enjoyed this little video. If you did, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up and maybe feel especially like porting something onto the NES for no reason at all and want to hit the subscribe button as well. I hope that all of you have a wonderful day and to see you soon. Goodbye!